The first time he laughed at me, I felt my cheeks burn hotter than the summer sun. It happened in the company parking lot, right after work. I had just parked my faded, dented, barely holding on sedan, a car that coughed every time it started and squealed like it was protesting every mile. It was not pretty, and I knew it. But it was mine. I had worked double shifts, saved every dollar, and bought it outright because I refused to drown in debt. But to him, that car was nothing but a punchline. He strolled past me in his tailored suit, the keys to his luxury car swinging between his fingers like a trophy. His laugh was loud, cruel, and sharp enough to cut through the air. "Man, you still driving that junk?" he said, not bothering to lower his voice. People around us chuckled nervously, not daring to defend me. I tried to brush it off, but the sting stayed. That car was not just transportation. It was a reminder of every sacrifice I had made, every late-night shift, every morning I had dragged myself out of bed just to keep moving forward. To me, it was a symbol of survival. To him, it was something to mock. For weeks, he made it a routine. Every morning when I pulled in, he would smirk, make a comment, shake his head in exaggerated pity. "Careful, man, that thing looks like it might fall apart in the lot." Or, "Hey, do they even let cars like that pass inspection anymore?" His friends laughed with him, and I would force a tight smile, swallowing the anger that bubbled inside me. I told myself to ignore it, that people like him thrived on making others feel small. But the truth is, every insult chipped away at me. Imagine working as hard as you can, knowing you are climbing from nothing, only to have someone stomp on the little progress you have made. One evening, I sat in my car after work, gripping the steering wheel, listening to the engine sputter. And I made a promise to myself. One day, I would not just shut him up, I would do it in a way he could never forget. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying his laughter in my head. The more I thought about it, the clearer my vision became. It was not just about buying a better car. It was about pulling up in something so spectacular, so undeniably perfect, that his smirk would vanish forever. But I was not wealthy. I did not have a trust fund or a family business backing me. What I had was grit, discipline, and the ability to wait for the right moment. I began to research, to plan, to imagine the path that would take me from being the guy with the beat-up sedan to the man behind the wheel of the very car he dreamed of owning. Revenge, I realized, is not always about words or confrontation. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is silent, sitting behind the wheel of a machine so beautiful that the sound of the engine drowns out every insult that was ever thrown your way. I closed my eyes and pictured it. The day I would glide into that same parking lot, not in my sputtering sedan, but in his dream ride. The look on his face would be worth every sleepless night, every dollar saved, every sacrifice made. And from that moment, the plan was set in motion. The sedan became more than just a car during those months. It was my training ground. Every sputter of the engine, every embarrassing squeal when I pulled out of the lot, every time I caught him laughing at me across the rows of shiny vehicles, it fueled my determination. Each insult was like a deposit into my invisible bank of revenge. I told myself that every day I drove that car was one day closer to the moment when everything would flip. But getting there was not easy. My paycheck barely stretched far enough to cover rent, bills, and food. Saving felt impossible at first. So I started cutting away at every unnecessary expense. The late-night takeout meals. Gone. Streaming subscriptions? Canceled. I picked up side jobs wherever I could, delivering food on weekends, freelancing late into the night. My friends teased me about being stingy, but I was not stingy. I was focused. Imagine standing at the edge of a long road, the horizon barely visible, but knowing with every step you take you are closer to it. That was how it felt. Every time I skipped a night out, every time I chose the cheaper option, I whispered to myself, one day, you will pull up in his dream ride. But it was not just about money. I had to learn the game. Luxury cars were not just expensive, they were complicated. Insurance, maintenance, depreciation, the cost could swallow you whole if you were not careful. I began studying the market, reading forums, talking to collectors. I learned which models held value, which ones broke down, which ones were rare enough to make jaws drop, but reliable enough to drive. And through all of this, he kept mocking me. It was almost comical how predictable he became. Every time I parked, there he was, leaning against his sleek car with that smug grin. One morning, as I stepped out of my sedan, he actually tossed me a dollar bill. "Here, man, maybe this will help you upgrade your wheels." His friends roared with laughter. I stood there, gripping the dollar so tightly it nearly tore, and smiled. Because what he did not know was that I was already halfway there. I pinned that dollar to my bedroom wall, right above my desk. Not as a reminder of humiliation, but as fuel. I looked at it every night before going to sleep, and every morning before going to work. It became my symbol. Someday, that single dollar of mockery would be replaced by the roar of an engine that cost more than his house. And then, after months of sacrifice, patience, and planning, it happened. I found it. Scrolling through a late-night car auction site, my eyes locked on the listing, his dream car. The very make and model he raved about to anyone who would listen. Midnight black, pristine condition, low miles, and the kind of price that made my heart pound. It was still far more than most people would even dream of spending, but I had been preparing for this. Between my savings, careful financing, and connections I had made in the car community, I realized something unbelievable. I could actually do it. That night, I did not sleep. I watched the seconds tick down on the auction timer, my hands sweating, my breath shallow. And when the final bid closed, it was mine. I sat there in stunned silence, staring at the confirmation screen, the reality washing over me. The same guy who had tossed me a dollar and laughed at my sedan had no idea what was about to come. The car was being delivered in a week. 7 days until I would drive past him in silence, the engine purring louder than his laughter ever had. 7 days until the parking lot became my stage, and he became my audience. And I could not wait. The morning the car arrived, I felt like a kid again, too restless to eat breakfast, pacing near the window as if time itself was dragging its feet. Then I heard it. The low growl of an engine I knew belonged to something far greater than anything I had ever driven before. The delivery truck pulled up, and there it was, shining under the sunlight like it had been carved out of pure midnight. His dream car, now mine. The delivery man rolled it down the ramp, and when the tires kissed the pavement, I swear my chest tightened. I walked around it slowly, running my fingers along the flawless paint, the polished chrome, the leather interior that smelled like success itself. I sat in the driver's seat, gripped the steering wheel, and for the first time, I did not just imagine revenge. I could feel it humming beneath my fingertips. The first drive was almost surreal. The engine roared, smooth yet powerful, like every mile was a declaration. People turned their heads as I passed. Strangers pointed. Kids on bikes shouted in awe. I had dreamed of this moment for so long that actually living it felt like stepping into a fantasy. But I knew the true stage was waiting, the company parking lot. That Monday, I left home early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to arrive before him. As I pulled into the lot, the engine rumbling deep and steady, heads turned instantly. My coworkers stopped mid-step, their conversations cut short as they watched me glide past. Phones came out, pictures were taken. I could feel their surprise. The same people who once laughed nervously at his jokes about my old car were now staring at me like they had never seen me before. And then, the moment I had been waiting for. He arrived. He pulled up in his luxury car, still proud, still smug, until he saw me. His eyes locked on my ride, and I watched his grin falter. For the first time, he was silent. His steps slowed, his shoulders stiffened, his confidence slipped just enough to reveal the shock underneath. I stepped out of the car calmly, as though nothing about this was unusual, as though driving his dream car was just another Monday for me. I could feel everyone watching, the silence stretching thin, the tension building. He forced a laugh, but it cracked in the middle, brittle and weak. "Nice rental," he muttered, trying to convince himself more than anyone else. I smiled, pulling the keys from my pocket, letting them dangle in the air where everyone could see. "Not a rental," I said softly, my voice steady, calm, final. The words landed heavier than any insult he had ever thrown at me. He blinked, looking from me to the car and back again, and in that moment, I saw it, the truth sinking into him. The guy he had mocked, the guy he had thrown a dollar bill at, was now sitting behind the wheel of the very car he had dreamed of his entire life. The silence of the lot broke as whispers spread, co-workers exchanging glances, some even grinning. I could feel the shift, the reversal of power, the sweet sting of victory. His laughter, once so loud, had been drowned out by the sound of my engine. But the real victory was not just about shutting him up. It was about proving to myself that I could climb from the bottom, that I could take every insult, every sneer, every laugh, and turn it into fuel. And as I slid back into the driver's seat that evening, the setting sun glinting off the hood, I knew this was only the beginning. Because the sweetest revenge is not in the moment itself. It is in how long it lasts. After that day in the parking lot, everything changed. It was not just about the car anymore. It was about the way people looked at me, the way the atmosphere shifted whenever I walked in. The same coworkers who once chuckled at his jokes now came over to ask me about the specs, the horsepower, the story of how I got it. Suddenly, I was not the punchline. I was the headline. And him? His silence lingered like an echo. He tried to play it cool, but you could see it in the way his jaw tightened when someone mentioned my name. He could not unsee the moment I had taken the keys out of my pocket and told him, calm and unshakable, not a rental. That phrase became a quiet joke around the office, whispered in hallways, muttered with knowing smirks whenever he walked past. He had laughed at me for months, using my old car as a symbol of failure. But now, his laughter had backfired. Every glance at my car in the lot reminded him of how quickly tables can turn. The man who once mocked me now avoided eye contact. His arrogance chipped away piece by piece every time my engine roared to life. The truth is, revenge is not always explosive. Sometimes, it is slow, steady, and impossible to escape. He had to live with the fact that I had what he wanted. He had to live with the whispers, the stares, the shift in respect that had slipped from his hands into mine. And me? I lived with something sweeter. Pride. Not the kind that comes from owning a luxury car, but the kind that comes from knowing I had built it, mile by mile, sacrifice by sacrifice. Every late-night shift, every side hustle, every time I skipped a meal out to save money, it was all worth it. Because now, every time I slid behind the wheel, I was not just driving a car. I was driving proof. Imagine pulling into the same spot where you once parked your rusted sedan, but now, people step aside to watch you glide past. Imagine sitting at a red light, the reflection of your ride catching the eyes of strangers who nod in admiration. Imagine knowing that the person who tried to make you feel small now shrinks a little every time he sees you. That was my reality. But what made it sweeter was not just his discomfort. It was how others reacted. Some coworkers pulled me aside to admit they had once laughed along because they were afraid of becoming his target. Others told me my story inspired them, that if I could climb out from under it did not take long for envy to start eating him alive. At first, he tried to ignore it, pretending my new car was just a fluke, a one-time stunt. But you could see the way his eyes lingered on it every morning, the way he slowed down his steps when he passed by, as if staring long enough might make it his. The man who once mocked me now looked restless, agitated, like my very existence was a reminder that his dominance had slipped through his fingers. Soon, the comments began again, not laughter this time, but bitterness. Must be nice, he muttered one afternoon as we both walked out to the lot. Bet you are drowning in payments. People like you do not keep cars like that for long. His words were sharp, but his tone was hollow, like he was trying to convince himself more than me. I just smiled, slid into the driver's seat, and let the engine roar. That sound silenced him better than any comeback ever could. But his desperation only grew. He started bragging louder about his own car, about vacations, about clothes, about anything he could weaponize to prove he was still ahead. The more he bragged, the more obvious it became that he was scrambling, clawing at scraps of pride. People saw it too. They began to gravitate toward me, not because of the car itself, but because they could see the truth. I had built my success, while he had only borrowed his image of it. The final confrontation came one Friday evening. We both left work late, the lot nearly empty, the air heavy with silence. He stopped beside me as I unlocked my car, his face tense, his voice low. You think you are better than me now? Just because you got lucky. I turned, met his eyes, and for the first time, I felt no anger. Only clarity. No, I said, my voice calm. I do not think I am better. I just know I worked harder. He stood there, stunned, with nothing left to say. I got into the car, the leather seats hugging me like a throne, and started the engine. The growl filled the empty lot, echoing off the walls, and in that moment, the balance was sealed. His laughter, his mockery, his arrogance, all of it had been drowned out by the sound of my victory. As I drove away, headlights cutting through the night, I realized something important. The revenge had been sweet, yes. Watching him shrink under the weight of his own envy was satisfying. But the real reward was not in shutting him down. It was in proving to myself that I could rise, that I could take every insult and turn it into fuel for the climb. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all, not just making your enemy silent, but making yourself unstoppable. So I will ask you, if someone laughed at your struggles, would you stay quiet? Or would you wait for the day you could pull up in their dream ride and let silence say everything?